Welcome to the podcast. My name is Chris Stenberg, and we are here with Richard Kanazawa, superstar winemaker on the Naramata Bench, to talk a little bit about winemaking and creativity and community and Penticton.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I'll use all my guesswork called creativity and let you know what I think.
Sounds good. I decided I would wear a cool local branded hat.
I saw it didn't go unnoticed.
For every one of these things. And
Perfect.
So today I have my Tommy's Burger Shack hat, which rest in peace, Tommy's Burger Shack. It's too bad.
R.I.P. I should have just wore a rice picker hat today.
Maybe just to start with, you can give me a little kind of preamble on who you are and what you do, and just a little bit about what it's like to be a winemaker in Penticton.
Sure. So after the intro there, my name's Rich Kanazawa. I've been a winemaker in the Okanagan since 2004. Upon returning from Australia, where I'd been for about 3 vintages, I came back and decided to get started on life and start working as a winemaker. So in 2004, I came back and became the head winemaker at Red Rooster. Then I went on to Blasted Church. I did my own winery for about 10 years until COVID, and then I closed that down. And then I took a job at where I am presently, Bench 1775, as their head winemaker. And this is about a medium-sized winery, so about 30,000 cases. Previously, the other wineries I worked at were about medium as well. I can't, other than my own brand, I can't see myself working at a place that's small like that. It's just a little bit boring for me. So I need a lot of other creative things to do. So, yeah, that's where we're presently at Bench 1775, and I've been here since 2020.
And you've kind of, I mean, in all that experience, you've actually had, that's quite the range of different types of wineries too. Not just different types of wine, but different styles of ownership, different, climate even within all that.
Yeah.
How does it differ maybe working for sort of a bigger size winery and then working for yourself? Because when I met you, you were doing your own thing, which I really enjoyed. And I still see the Torii every time I drive by, which is so cool. But obviously running a small lot winery, passion project, business, all the things together can be challenging. And then COVID was not kind, I'm sure.
Yeah, it wasn't kind. Yeah, you do get all the different variables. I mean, relatively speaking, this is a very young winery region. Still, I would have to say, unlike a lot of other places that you work in the world, for example, Australia, where a lot of owners have experience, they're farmers already before that. And then they've decided to do their own winery. So you have a different style of management, a different understanding. I think many owners in the Okanagan aren't from farming backgrounds. They're from backgrounds where they've had success in other careers and decided their passion project or their retirement project that they soon find out isn't a retirement project is a winery. So on the outside it looks great, but on the inner workings, you're going to feel that struggle and you're going to see all that sort of stuff come out, because this is not like any other business. You're not going to be like some forest lumber broker and then all of a sudden go into grape growing and winemaking and think you're reinventing the wheel.
It is interesting actually, because I've noticed, in the wineries that I've worked for in my time here, kind of on the sidelines, you have people that are wildly successful at something, whatever that might be, banking, forestry, mining, whatever it might be, or some other kind of business. But then they come to this with it becomes their baby, and that's really challenging, because all that objectivity that might work in other businesses, that you developed like a strong sense of business acumen and a way of doing things that was efficient and profitable, can all just fall apart as soon as this thing that's your baby gets involved, and you just end up so wrapped up in something that ultimately, no matter how much money you have so little control over, because we're at the mercy of Mother Nature to some degree.
I mean, the irony of that is many of these guys come from worlds where they were successful making money, and then they buy a winery and they're successful at losing it. I mean, it's a lot.
I mean, they do say there's that running joke about how do you take a big fortune and make it a small one, open a winery or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
And you hear that over and over again. And at first it starts to sound cliche, but then you go through a couple seasons like we've had here in the Okanagan the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And it starts to feel pretty real. And you can see the evidence of that around now.
Yeah. The last 2 years have been, I don't know if you call it a wake-up call, because Mother Nature does what she wants. And you never bet against Mother Nature. So that's how I look at that. Every year is different. Every year has its own set of challenges, may it be in the cellar or in the workforce or in the farm. There's so many different variables for winemaking that you're going to have to be creative at some point, somewhere along the line, for any of these things. May it be, the alternatives to how you're going to make your wine, or the judgment when you do make a wine that doesn't taste like everything else, or the cost of making that wine. There's lots of area to play around, and lots of stuff not to do, meaning, we understand the winery wines are traditional. And so if you're making some kind of weird blend that doesn't fit from anywhere else in the world, it's kind of odd.
Do you think, though, being in this space, because winemaking is fairly young in the Okanagan, but do you feel like there's a little more room to play here than there might be if you were somewhere else? Or
yeah, I think there's a little bit more room to play here, because we don't have these traditional rules like that are just hammered into you, where if you're in this valley you can only make these sorts of wines, or you can only make this wine because your vineyard is designated to only do this. So within that, there's a ton of area to play around with. The difficulty is you still want to be taken seriously within the world of winemaking, but here it's very protected. It's very small, and so you see a lot of interesting things happen. Some of it I like, some of it I don't, but you also find that the consumers will figure that out on their own, because let's face it, you can be creative, but if that wine doesn't sell, it doesn't sell.
Do you have any examples of something that might have been like something you tried or that you've seen that maybe was cool but just didn't sell? Or
well, I have an opposite one of that, is that it's more of a happy ending. I like to always say I'm a great guesser. When people are like, what's your intuition to do this, or why did you do that? It's like I was sitting in my car driving, and I thought, this is what I'm going to do. So one time for my own brand, I made this rosé called Sakura, which just means cherry blossom, but it was a rosé. Well, the first time I made it, I was practicing a lot of minimalist and natural style winemaking. And so it's a roll of a dice and a bit of praying that happens when that is, because you're using indigenous yeast that's not been researched to make sure that it kills off the yeast strains and brings out all the best of, say, Pinot Noir as a rosé. And so I just left it. There was a definite flaw in the wine. It was ethyl acetate, which is kind of reminiscent of nail polish remover. But that was in that wine. Now, I could have added yeast and tried to take care of that, but I'm pretty stubborn when I make a decision like this, so I said I'm just going to let it roll like that. I took that wine to 2 other winemakers that are friends of mine, and I just got them to try it. Now, I didn't tell them I needed a cheerleader or I just needed some really brutal, opinions, but I said it and let them, they know I can take whatever, so I just let them try it, and both of them said to me, I would add some other wine to that to fix it up. I would try to do this. I would try to do that. You left it too long. And then when I drove out from the last friend I met, I was like, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm balling it as is, and I'm going to take it into the market. And this is, to me, the fascinating part. Now, 10 years ago before that, if I would have done that, there would have been critics and somms that would have tasted that wine and said, this is flawed, it's no good. But if they would have tried something from France that tasted like that at the same time, they'd be like, this is amazing, this is great. So what it taught me is when I went down to Vancouver to sell that wine, it wasn't a lot, it was about 300 cases, but I had all 300 cases allocated within a week, and I was done selling that wine. And that told me, it signaled a big change in my winemaking, because it just made me confident in the somms that are down there being educated by tasting all these world's best wines that get presented to them. And now they know. So if you make something locally like that, they can appreciate it rather than turn their nose up against it and say, that guy doesn't know what he's doing, which could have happened earlier days. So it just shows the maturity of the guys buying the wines, the guys judging the wines. And, you can be as creative as you want,
I remember Sakura actually.
Yeah.
That was a great wine. And I don't have the experience to be able to say exactly why necessarily with all those things, but I remember it being kind of unique and also it having a lot of fanfare. You know, friends of mine in the restaurant industry being like, "You have to try this."
Yeah, it was a game changer for me personally, winemaking wise. And it's weird to say based on like making a rosé, but it just I go back to that story many times because I've been with wine critics and somms, masters of wine drinking, and I've heard them say something that's flawed and champion it. And I said, well, what if we put a label from BC on that? What would you guys say? Right? Like, I'm that kind of person that's going to hold your foot to the fire when we talk like that. And they got to learn, you know, like if something's going to have a flaw over season, it's going to be good. Then why can't it be here?
But it's funny though, because I think with wine especially, you're right, there is like a bias towards like certain countries and certain styles of winemaking that has kind of cropped up or, you know, come up in the past, probably in the Robert Parker era, especially just because, you know, there's become this kind of homogenization of the style of wine that we drink, but yet, you know, you get some really peculiar varietal or peculiar style of wine or even a peculiar vintage from another country. And people do tend to go, oh, that's really interesting. But locally, we're trying to still, you know, get these points and how many gold medals did it get and whatever.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, you know, that's a tough thing, you know. Someone asked me once before, are awards important? And I said, yeah, if you're not winning any. Really. I mean, if you're, you know, on the higher end of the winemaker scale around the province or in Canada, you're consistently seeing the same guys win multiple best of awards. And it's not so much for the consumer that it is, I think, a lot of the guys in the industry that see that's what's going to get you a better job offer. That's what's going to get you, once they see you're proven in that way. But I never let an outside influence tell me how it should be. Because inevitably, I just think, well, they don't know. I do. I see this fruit. I'm walking the vineyards when I'm sweating my butt off. I'm in the cellar when it's fermenting. You're seeing all this stuff. You're shepherding it all the way through. So when just as an off comment, you should make this style or you should do that, I never flinch at those comments because that's called free advice. And the person giving that advice has zero accountability for anything they may say to you and you actually do. And so I would usually call myself like a pretty bad listener when it comes to people giving me advice. Yeah, it happens all the time, and I just kind of joke that off. Apparently, when I smile, I have dimples, so people just think he's not such a bad guy. But really, the sentiment is, I'm never going to listen to you.
I love it. I mean, so where do you think that instinct is coming from? Like, you've obviously been making wine for a long time now. You know, you got into it through a range of different experiences, but where is your instinct for that? That's kind of like, this is what I'm doing. This is why I believe in this. Like, this is what it should taste like because I said so. Where's that coming from?
That's a really tough question. I grew up in a Japanese home with a stereotypical Japanese dad that when he would ask me and my friends what we're doing, they would just automatically assume, should we leave? He's mad. Maybe, yes, he was angry, but I don't know where that comes from because in a Japanese house like that, you're not very defiant, okay? Like my motto was, don't get caught here. But when it got into winemaking, something really changed in me. I mean, I've got had a career playing like really high level rugby and stuff, which kind of gives you the confidence to make decisions as you go, especially when you're like leading men, you know, when you're leading big boys and you're talking to them a certain way and you do that. And then when it comes into real life, I think I take a lot from sport and apply it. And if you don't have confidence in this job, like a chef, then what are you doing? I can imagine if you went up to a seasoned chef and said, hey, maybe add some salt to this. They would look at you like, what? I mean, that's why you go to a fine dining restaurant and there's no salt and pepper or ketchup like at a Denny's sitting there for you. It's because the guy that made it should know how it's supposed to be presented. And that's the subjective part about wine. Everybody can be a critic. You just need, like when a person in the tasting room says, I don't really like this, or I didn't hate this, I didn't hate this as my favorite one. I always say that is the compliment of the day, but to where do you get to the point where you're staunch and say no? Maybe it's you work for some owners that tell you what to do and their ideas are what you conceive as horrible and think this is why you're at this level right here. So I ignore that and then I make them good wine that becomes award-winning wine and get their wines into the top wineries in the country. And usually that just dissipates, and so I've just, at the end of the day, I said, well, these are wines that I put in the bottle. Your name, you own the place, but your name isn't on this as the winemaker, and you got to live with that. So, right or wrong, I'll always just do what I want.
How much of your winemaking style or decisions is sort of centered around food and where you want these wines to end up, in terms of like maybe restaurants or what people are eating with them, or like, do you think about that consciously, or are you just is it wine and then food? Or
it's a bit of both. If you look at our portfolio at Bench here, we have what I consider to be maybe too many wines because we have all these vineyards that have different grapes. So that's the focus, to use all our own fruit and not buy any from anybody else. But the obvious is to make wine first, and then afterwards you can think about how it's paired up. But within that, when I started here in 2020, I didn't really make a sweet wine other than the ice wines and late harvest wines are obviously maybe too sweet for a lot of people's palate. But I made table wine like a Gewürztraminer, for instance. Almost everybody thinks a Gewürztraminer is going to be sweet. I make mine really dry, and I make it dry so it just doesn't go with spicy food. It can go with a lot of other food, and that's the way I made it. But the creativity in there, yeah, sure. Look at me. I'm a guy that loves to eat, but I don't pick a wine in mind. I make the food, and then I'm like, what are we gonna have with this? What's gonna go with this? So being Japanese, it is funny when I have a person come into the shop and just lets their question rip with, so you make wine to pair with Japanese food? And I'm like, no, like, that's not the case. Yeah, I guess you might think that, but that's not the case.
That's a strange baseline question, though, too. But not to go too far down this path, but there was a time I was in Saskatchewan and we went to a brewery. We go in and they had made like a Szechuan beer with some Chinese spices in it to pair with some local Szechuan cuisine down the road at a kind of cool restaurant. And the guy turns and looks at me. He's like, and now we have our Asian wine. And just the way, I was like, just you think that I'm going to like it? Because, first of all, I'm not Szechuan. Second of all, but it was interesting, though. There is that sort of lean that people are immediately going to think, oh, you're a Japanese winemaker. You must be making wine specifically for, from where you come from.
Yeah. And I would see that here, especially when I first started in the Okanagan. I'd get questions from Europeans, like French or German guys that would say like, well, what do you know about wine? I said, well, what do you do in Germany? He's like, I'm a truck driver. I said, what do you do about wine? Because you live there through osmosis, you just know, right? I had a French guy come through and taste wines, and he was like, oh, he wasn't impressed or whatever. He was just turning on. I said, well, what do you do in France? Oh, I'm an IT guy. I'm like, you drink a lot of wine? Not really. I'm like, yeah, you were the judge for me here.
And that's always the fascinating thing about, making wine, because it is so subjective, but there's so many sort of like bogey bias things that just crop up, people want to believe certain things, or, if you lead them down a certain path, they'll think certain things. And so, they may know nothing about wine, but they have the limited knowledge of what they've sort of acquired along the way, rather than like maybe just sitting back and tasting it.
Yeah, and especially if you work in a tasting room, and when I owned my own place and I'd have people come in, they would regurgitate from other wineries they would hear, and I said, who told you that? Like if you're getting advice from a tasting room staffer that's not really educated, but that person, it's like, what's that campfire game when you like whisper into someone's ear and it comes all weird?
Telephone.
Telephone. Yeah, like someone starts that off, and then when it gets to the end, it's like, what? That's not even scientifically possible, but these things evolve as the day goes on while they're traveling around talking to people.
There's something to be said. I think a lot of people, they want, when they get into tasting wine and the whole culinary scene, if you become like a foodie or wino. I don't know, that's probably not the right word.
Sure.
Whatever you want to call it. If you become an aficionado of wine, you know, a lot of people, they start out and they really want to know a lot about it. And you see these people and have dinner with them sometimes. And it's almost like I was guilty of this too. Like you're sponging up all this knowledge and you're trying to learn about it. And then there comes a point, hopefully for everybody, that you just kind of relax and decide what it is that you like and don't like. And you know, maybe that knowledge quest continues, but it's not really like about showing off anymore or trying to be the most knowledgeable person at the
just
table.
being accepted, sitting there. I mean, the amount of times I've had a friend phone me because they're going to a wine tasting and they're nervous about it because they're not in the wine world. They're just a regular guy that drinks beer on the weekends and not even craft beer. And now they find themselves going into, excuse me, what they figure as a hostile environment for them, where they're going to have to say some words about what they're tasting. And, you know, in jest, I always tell them, take a sip. And if it's a white wine, just say, hey, this tastes like various stone fruit. Just cover everything. Or like if you try a red wine, just tell them it tastes like fruit from the forest floor. You're done. They're like, seriously? I'm like, be brave and go ahead and just do that.
You know, somebody takes your wine home, they have it. What's sort of the ideal thing that happens for them? Like,
I just hope that they try that, especially when I was making my own wine. It's very unique. I just really hope, because I usually ask people, like, what kind of wine do you like? And, you know, one overstated line I hear is like, oh, I like big, bold reds. And I'm let's cut to the chase here. So look, what really do you like about the wine? It doesn't need to be, it could be lighter color and bold. So I always tell them, I don't know if this is for you, but here, try it. They like it. It's kind of wine off the beaten path. They take it home. My hope is that when they go home, is that they're not going to open it up and be like when you buy clothing for yourself and you think that you're looking good, and then you come home and you try it on. It's like, what happened here? You know, you don't want that lost in translation happening. So I've asked people that, you know, over the years, and I get emails from people and they said, hey, I didn't really believe in your wine at first, but I bought it anyways. And yeah, it's 10 years old and it's great. And that's what makes me happy, is that they learned something by coming to the winery and knowing that not all wines have to be exactly the same, and that there's different calibers and there's different styles for the same grape that can be accepted. And those are the best kind of the feedback you can get. If someone can go home and they open it up with friends and they try it, and I hear back from those friends that tried it at dinner party, those are the things that make me happy, that's being shared. And like I would call it, like they're doing my promotional work for me. Is you know, and when you're a boutique like that, name spreads quickly, and that's the best you can really hope for, that they enjoy it with friends, and then it just keeps on going.
Word of mouth is kind of the ultimate. Like you can't go without that. Especially, I mean, we do have kind of a small wine community in BC, even though, you know, British Columbia is pretty large, and there's a lot of wineries here, but compared to other regions, you know, everybody kind of knows each other and knows what's happening and become familiar with certain wineries and winemakers and things. So yeah, it's a little smaller that way, it feels like. It is.
And the word travels fast around here when someone's doing something interesting. You know, one thing I found when I moved here in 2004, one winery was winning a lot of awards at the time. And I just remember how many people I spoke to just telling me basically they're going to they heard from their owners, or they want to make this style of wine to mimic that. And that's just, everything about that is so wrong for me. Just that mentality is so wrong. It's like, how about just worry about yourself and what you're going to do and work on that. Don't try to mimic somebody from here or anywhere. I mean, there's a lot of inspirational wines being made out of France and interesting stuff like that. Like those wines are wines I don't really talk about too much, but I save spot in my brain to think about them. And then I'll try to, do some of these practices in my own cellar and see if it works, or in the vineyard, and to see if it works. Because you just need to know at the end of the day, you got to play within these boundaries, right? Of, it can be creative, but how risky is it to do that? And at the very end, is it going to be accepted? I usually don't care about the exception part too much, because I just know that it's going to translate okay. I've never really had something that hasn't gone over that well. So it just keeps me doing and trying unique things that I want to do.
What about natural wine? I think this is sort of like
It's a loaded question.
it is a loaded question, and you know, it's, I'd say probably next to no alcohol wine is probably one of the hot topics in the industry, and quite polarizing depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are two, you know, and that's another thing, you know, it leads into when you're talking about creativity and stuff is where are you going to be pressured to make your decision? Where's it coming from? What's, I guess, you know, inspiring you to do that? And so when I look at that sort of stuff, like I know the wines that I like, and I like a lot of, as you'd say, like rustic kind of wines, old world wines, where they know how much filth to put in a bottle of wine. Those, I find those wines to be intriguing and it really speaks to like sense of place, as we would say, right? Terroir. But when you get to natural wines, sometimes some of them are so flawed that you can't really even taste the varietal character of a wine. Now, when I was coming up and I would hear this sort of lingo in a winemaker interview, I would think, come on, how boring is that answer? You just want to make wines that are varietally correct, blah, blah, blah. It's, to me, there's no passion in that. But then when you really get stuck into being a head winemaker, what are you trying to do? You're trying to do exactly that. You're trying to make a grape taste like it's supposed to. There can be different styles of it, but it can't be so flawed that it doesn't taste like the original. You know, that's, you might as well just chuck 18 different grapes into a pot and stir them up and call it whatever you want. That's where I have an issue with some natural wines, is that you can hide behind the fact that it's natural wine and it's flawed, or what I'd even call like lazy winemaking. You know, it's not true. A lot of people think that anybody can do this job, or if I was to leave here, somebody else would come in and just do the same thing. It's not true. The old adage is you need good grapes to make good wine. Well, if you got a bad winemaker and good grapes, it's not always going to make good wine. And that's the difference where creativity and knowing the science, but being able to have fun in the art department of that world is where I like to hang out, because that's all by intuition and it's not a textbook. It's calculated guessing, I guess, if you want to say that. And that's what will inspire you to keep doing other things that maybe that the textbook says don't do that, or definitely a friend of yours is like, I would never do that. But you got to know your audience, and then you have to hope that the outside world there, because of the popularity of wine, is trying things that are going to motivate people to push their boundaries and taste other things. So that natural wine has that. I think that fad is, I wouldn't call it a fad. I mean, that's how monks used to make it too, right? Just leaving a sack there, rains on, you get the water, there's beer. So, you know, it's not going away, but I've when I have arguments with some of my friends, I would say, well, if that's the case, then why isn't there a winery that's doing 30,000 cases of natural wine? You don't see that. You see maybe making 1,000 or 2,000 or what have you, but you don't see anybody making that kind of thousands and thousands of cases.
And I think what's hard about it too, and somebody else pointed this out to me, is that, you know, it's great, the idea of natural wine. Of course, we all want to have less intervention in the things that we eat, I think, and drink. But the flip side of that is that there's also a lot of variables in winemaking, you know, the weather, different disease and pests and things that can cause you all kinds of issues during the season. And as a business, you know, you might make a spectacular natural wine one year, but next year you've got a completely different thing to deal with.
There's no consistency. Yeah, for sure. There's no consistency. And, you know, as you're talking about natural wines in general, you know, I just think about who are they made for and who's going to like that. I've even said to some of my friends that make natural wines, like, how can you leave, like, you know, a quarter of the bottle full of sediment? Like, I'm old school like that. I come from a time where if you had that in your bottle, you'd be like, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be there. Am I going to get fired? You want it to be clear. But now you've got a lot of guys, and to be honest, a lot of the guys that do natural wines, and education isn't the most important thing in winemaking, but these guys are just self-starters that add yeast and let her rip. And there's something to be said about that, and something very fun. And, youthful and energetic about that sort of winemaking. But it also leads to not following like rules that should not be changed in winemaking. And those rules are just by taking extra steps to make sure that it's more clear before you release it. I had an argument with a friend about sediment in a wine. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. So just at the very end, when the bottle had, a quarter of it left and it was all sediment, I just poured it into his glass and said, drink that. Tell me how much you enjoy that, because you're not drinking anything at my house until you drink that. And that's the way I was bullying him and arguing with him at my home, because I'm just like, you can't sit there and tell me that sandpaper you're drinking is all of a sudden delicious,
It's funny because I mean, many times had that bottom of the bottle that, whether it was natural or not, all the junk comes out and it's not really that enjoyable.
No, they're very sharp. It's like tartary crystals. It's like, with no flavor.
And I think too, like the other thing about natural wine for me personally, I mean, of course, I'm going to lean as natural as I can get. But the flip side of that is I also want to drink something that tastes good. And I've had natural wine, some that was great, and others that it was like very barnyardy or, earthy, like too earthy.
Yeah.
And
you get that, like smell like a pile of manure. Like,
yeah,
you get that. And that's what you want to prevent from happening. And I would dare say if it's smelling like that, they probably have more issues in their cellar with a bacteria called Brettanomyces. Now in beer making, they love that. But in winemaking, it's a no-no, and you might have a bigger problem because of other things in your cellar. So I look at cellars are living things, right? So you won't find any of those problems if you go to a winemaking company that is making 0% alcohol wines. But I don't know isn't that just called grape juice? Like just from a guy that only makes alcoholic wines, I would say like how much to get shares in that company Ribena, and just start watering that up and just selling it as non-alcoholic wine.
Well, this is a whole nother thing and something I've been studying a little bit, but just the kind of trends in non-alcoholic wine or just non-alcoholic beverage in general. I mean, it seems to be that the younger generation is kind of drinking a little less. I don't know if that's, a cyclical thing. I don't know if it's an of the moment thing. I'm not sure. But, there certainly is a trend towards like less alcohol at the moment. But wine is wine. And I mean, I think there is a place in the market for non-alcoholic wine. And I've certainly had some. And I think as long as it's kind of, for me personally anyway, as long as it's treated in a way that when I have it, I'm not really expecting it to be wine.
Yeah.
Then I'm okay with it. If I'm expecting it to be the same as like a normal rosé or a Merlot that I would have or whatever on a Friday night, then it's not really going to line up with expectation. But when I started to see it as its own thing, I'm like, okay, this has a place for sure.
Yeah, like comparing apples to apples, right? It's like I walk into a place and it's a vegan place and they're like, hey, we have vegan brisket. And I'm like, what? In my head, I'm thinking, it looks saucy. I guess it is. And then I have it. I'm like I just got lied to. If I looked at it as, what is it? I think it's called seitan. All this dough that was baked and put barbecue sauce on it, and I knew I'd be like, okay, so it's closer to a meatloaf, then I would understand. But the initial shock is that it's like, the quality is getting better for all those types of those beverages. Like I remember when the only non-alcoholic beer you could ever get was O'Doul's, and now everybody's got one out. I mean, my children was like, what does beer taste like? We were coming home from skiing one time. I was like, I will get you a 0% Heineken and you can treat yourself. And they tried it. They're like, no, I'm just good with this. I'm like, well, you know what it tastes like. I don't mind that sort of stuff. But yeah, when it starts replacing things, and, it seems to be very popular right now. And like you say, I don't know, there's someone higher up there that knows why those trends are happening. But, is it just younger guys? Obviously, it's different than when I grew up, how much like anti-drinking and I guess education that's out there. But also, I mean, we grew up in a time where also marijuana wasn't legal. And now, it is. So I don't know how many kids or how many younger folks are getting into that as well, right?
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of alternatives now too that are legal that, may be taking the place of that. And, that's a whole different conversation. But
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly though, I think natural wine is the one thing that I think is sticking out to me as the like, I mean, especially with the younger generation, it seems to be, I don't want to say trendy, but I understand completely where it's coming from, the idea, but yeah, where is the line in the sand between?
That's right.
Yeah.
I made a Merlot that was, most guys are used to making Merlots that are 14, 15, even 16%. If you're getting some from Napa, and I made my wine so it's 12%. The color was a little lighter, but it had tons of like fruit, really good like plummy, cherry, dark cherry notes to it. And I'm like, this is gonna impress people because it's not over the top with so much oak. It's a little bit lighter, but it's very good. And that changed a lot of people's mind. And that's where I got that comment from when a person came into my shop and said, oh, I hate Merlot. But when I gave them that Merlot and they said, I don't hate this, and they bought some, I was like, that's my new favorite compliment right there. I don't hate this. Setting the bar very low for acceptable compliments.
But I mean, if you can change someone's mind about something that they're determined not to like, then that's great.
From that person, I even got their username on Instagram and I tagged them in the picture. That's what they said.
We were in Whistler in the summer, and I think it's like one of the warehouse restaurants. They have a sign out front that says, come try the worst whatever cocktail it was that so-and-so on Yelp ever had.
Yeah.
Which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, like, most people are very sensitive to reviews. I had one person that put in a review that wasn't very nice. It was like the only bad one I ever had. And I had more people come to the wine shop and say, I read that woman's review and I knew I had to come here. And I was like, oh, so you guys can read between the lines. Like, it was perfect.
I love that. Yeah. When somebody's a critic to you or when they say something, they're not the ones that have to put food on their table or sell all that wine.
They don't need to answer to any of that. And so, I can be, funny about it, or I can be dead serious when I'm like, why would I listen to you? Like, why?
There's something to be said for that. And there's something to learn for like all creative people in that lesson right there.
Yeah. It's funny. Some of those wine critics that I've spoken to have some of the best one-liners ever. Like one person told me, I told them something I was going through about winemaking wise, and they said, oh, Rich, just do what I would do. Just ask them if they want the short no or the long no. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Either way, all roads lead to no. And they're like, yeah, just say that. And I'm like, perfect. This is someone that was giving me advice.
I think it's great. I mean, that's kind of a good place to like sum this up too. I mean, I think if you're creative, you have to take bold chances and listen to your instinct and just go with it. And of course, you're going to have lots of little voices telling you different things, whether they're outside voices or inside voices. At some point, you got to make a decision and put it out there. Yeah,
and especially when you're a younger winemaker or like a younger chef, you are susceptible to that criticism from outside. You don't have enough confidence to like really, really back yourself. And I don't know when that develops. It just happens overnight. When it happens, it happens. And you recognize that. And any of these struggles that you may have in your cellar or whatever, because you're wrapped up that way, you usually live and die on your own. You just know if you're going to not do things by committee, which doing things by committee, I'm a firm believer that leads to mediocrity a lot. So good or bad, I'd rather go in one of those directions. Most of the time they're better than being in the middle. And so that's what I'll do. And that's where the confidence comes from, to say, I'm gonna be creative and make my wines this way. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but it's not far from the original, yet it has that aesthetic like difference to it that people can pick it up and not every Syrah has to taste exactly like its neighbor. And that's why if you said, can any winemaker make this wine? Or can you make this wine from any other vineyard? The answer is no. And that's the part that you got to hang your hat on, because you do make a difference creatively when you're doing that stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Thanks so much for chatting with me.
Anytime, man.
This has been great.
Anytime. Beautiful spot. Oh. Good day. Good company.
Doesn't get better than this. Now let's get some ramen.
Yeah. Cheers.
We've been trying to do that forever.